Okay, guys, we are going to pretend that this is a 4-H demonstration gone viral. Well, maybe not viral, but at least to the people that asked for the recipe. I am doing gluten-free focaccia. It is a combination of an old Frugal Gourmet recipe and a technique that I learned from Iowa Girl Eats with my own modifications. Okay, I start off with a cup of water and I microwaved it for a minute, and I've got a tablespoon of just white sugar. It's going to go in. And then I've got a fourth a cup of canola oil. And then we've got to put the yeast in. We'll see how my technique is here. And we need, oh, we got help. I've got 2 hands now. We need 2 and a, whoops, except I've got to measure right. All right, I've got 1 teaspoon of yeast in there because I'm using the half cup or half teaspoon. And now I'm going to go to 1/4. So 2 1/4 teaspoons of, I'm using rapid rise. And then I need 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And we're gonna blend this and let it sit for 8 to 10 minutes until it's foamy. And we'll be back and show you what it looks like after it foams. I'm just gonna stir this all in. All right, see you in a minute. Okay, so I have a hold and warm setting on my oven. So I turned it on a little while ago before I started mixing everything. So it had warmed up quite a bit, and put the initial yeast mixture in there for 8 minutes, and this is what it's like. So it's foamy. It's a little bit different than if you have done other yeast baking in the past. So now here's where it gets really weird when you're doing gluten-free. I am going to use baking powder even though we're doing a yeast bread. So today we're using a Cup for Cup brand gluten-free flour. It is not a baking mix. I have also done this with King Arthur's baking mix, like their Bisquick substitute, and it works really well. If you are using something that already has some leavening in it, I would say reduce the baking powder to 2 teaspoons. So I've got 2 1/2 cups. And again, gluten-free is not the way that other baking is. So I'm going to put probably about 1/3 of that in. And then I'm going to put my baking powder on top. So you get 3 baking powders. And it is a 1/4 of a cup or 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt also. And then I'm going to stir that a little bit so I've got it started. Then the other thing that is different about gluten-free yeast baking, if you haven't done much of it yet, is that it takes egg. And anytime we have tried to convert a regular quote-unquote recipe, a wheat-based recipe, to gluten-free, and we have forgotten egg, we have had to go back and rework it. So I've got 2 just regular eggs that I've beaten with a fork, and those are going in. So I'm going to incorporate those and then decide how much flour I think it needs. It is going to be a very soft dough. All right, so I've got probably 1.5 cups left there, give or take. I'm going to put about a little bit more than half in there and see what it feels like. And this is going to be something that as you guys get better or more experienced with it, you'll just start to get a feel for it. The recipe technique that I'm using from Iowa Girl Eats talks about it feeling like a soft cookie dough. So right now I'm more like at a muffin batter. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the rest in. So the rest is gonna go in, and I'm gonna incorporate it. And you could do this, sometimes I use my stand mixer, but for this small batch, it's easy to do just by hand. So you can see it's kind of sticky. It's a little bit thicker than what I would say a muffin batter is, but it's not really, if you've been a yeast bread baker in the past, for a wheat dough, it's too sticky. But we're gonna leave it just the way it is. You can kind of see it's clumped together. It's got a little bit of springiness to it. And we're just gonna push it all down together, kind of in a lump. And then I've turned off the hold warm feature of my oven now that it's warm. But I'm gonna stick it in there and let it rise for about 45 minutes. And then it'll get a second proofing after we get it out on the tray and have it formed. All right, see you in a little bit. All right, so I put it back in my oven that had already been pre-warmed. Remember I have the hold and warm setting on my oven. I had turned that on for about 15 minutes before I started baking, and have just turned it off so that, but that oven's acting as a proof box. So we got more than a double rise on this, but it doesn't act the way normal bread, wheat bread would act. You can't press it and know that if you pushed it in so far, it's a good rise. But you can tell just based on the way it looks that we've got a good rise on it. All right, so now I've got a baking sheet that's a half sheet pan, and I have parchment paper that I've sprayed with canola spray, baking spray. And I'm just gonna scrape this out on it, and it's gonna be kind of foamy and airy. Looks like I didn't get it all mixed very well. And then I'm gonna do something that is counterintuitive to all wheat bakers. I'm going to make my hands wet. So just getting my hands wet, and then I'm gonna press it out. So it is very different if you are a wheat baker. This is not, doesn't seem right. But there's no real punch down. You just press it, and what you're looking for is, it won't be a full sheet. See, if it starts to get sticky, you've got to go back and get more water. It won't be a full sheet, but you want it to be distributed evenly, and I would say it's about a ½ inch thick. If you are a biscuit maker, a rolled biscuit maker, it's thinner than what you would press out biscuit dough to be. And as you switch from different flours, you're just going to have to learn one thing we have really learned over the last 8 years of working with gluten-free is that less flour is more, because there's so much starch in the mixes, and they just act differently with liquid in recipe. But so there you go. It's pretty rustic. This is not a fancy bread. Now I've got a 1/4 cup of olive oil with some pre-chopped garlic. We call squeezed garlic at our house. And I'm going to just pour this over the top. And you're right, there's a lot of oil there, and there's oil in the recipe, but it turns out. And just use a brush to brush that and distribute it. And then I've got some kosher salt, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of this. I don't want a whole lot on it, but you could use a flake salt, or if you have a salt grinder. And then I've got some rosemary leaves. I like it better with fresh rosemary, but it's not quite that time of year here yet. So I'm just putting a sprinkling of probably, I don't know, not even 1/4 a cup, maybe more like 1/8 a cup. And then I'm going to put a little bit of red pepper flake on it. Again, my hands are wet, so it's not going to go as smoothly as it could, but just a little bit of red pepper. And then we're going to put this back in the oven that is still at the hold. It's just warm from the hold setting, and let it rise for about 20 minutes. I'll show it to you before we turn the oven on to bake, and so you get a good idea of what it ought to look like before it's baked. Okay, so it's been in the oven for 20 minutes, and you'll see we did get a rise out of it. It looks nice, it's all fluffy. So now we're going to turn the oven to 350 degrees. I have a convection feature, so I'm going to use it because I think it helps brown it up nicely. We're going to start baking it for 15 minutes and then just kind of go from there. You really have to just judge the particular flour blend that you're using as to when it's going to be done. So we'll show it to you when it's done. Again, it's going to be baked at 350 degrees, and I am going to use the convection oven on my home oven. Okay, look, it actually looks like actual focaccia. And this one baked for about 20 minutes. Hope, can you get under? So we got a nice brown on the underside. Now wait for it. It's so hot I can't hardly tear it. But it actually tears like bread. It's pretty exciting. All right, hope you guys have fun making it. Send me an email or a text if you have questions.